Thank you to both speakers. And I have already started collecting some questions in the chat. Both of you mentioned some very critical issues, whether it is infrastructure that needs to be in place for different modes of online and distance learning to be successful, whether it is teacher training, whether it is how to support strategies for supporting students and keeping those communication channels open. Or overall, you gave very great suggestions and also opened our mind up to so many different types of and modes of learning, and also what each one would require to be successful. So let's start again with some of the questions that came through the chat. So one of the questions was addressed to Roy. Could you please elaborate how political effects of COVID-19 pandemic affected the educational arena? You presented at the start of the session some stats from the US.
Correct. Yeah. So when I think it was one of my first slides, I highlight the 4 factors that impacted work and learning, and one of them was political. And I think I've mentioned that 3 of the political factors: 1, increase in online globalization; 2, the rise of nationalism; and 3, public funding for higher education. All of these are impacted mostly in the governmental level in terms of funding, and supporting online education, as well as individuals who really want to push for more funding to support online learners remotely. I wouldn't necessarily. I think I picked one. I think I've sort of. I mean, part of when I mentioned that in the slide is that political wasn't a strong factor. I would say that's one of the least factor of my 4 factor analysis. I would say it's more social, economic, and technological. But when we take the PES analysis, which is the political, economic, social, technological analysis, I felt like I wanted to add the 4th one, which is political. But it's not really necessarily political. There isn't really much of a political effects of COVID-19 with online learning. I would say that's like almost the least factor that should be taken into, particularly in the educational arena.
Excellent. Thank you. A question has come through in the chat for Michael. How to handle digital body language and Zoom fatigue?
Yes, that we all suffer from. I think I'm not advocating that we go completely all online for one. But I think when we're talking about, I think the incorporation of the digital classroom that we had a look at earlier, where the whole body can be monitored by the camera. There are different angles. I think that is obviously a contributing factor to ensuring that body language is expressed well through this. So all of the normal social things that we would do to communicate, including on body language, are kind of lost when you're in a window, a bit like I think a bit like the Muppets on the Muppet Show at the beginning, where we're all in little windows and you can't really see much of anything else. It's usually just our heads. So I think making sure that is, and as the technology changes, also the incorporation of those, like I said, those different angles, and making sure that the platform that we're using enables you to switch very quickly from a presentation back to a full shot of yourself, back to another dimension of yourself, back to the students. Having all these different angles are really important, and I think that does help with Zoom fatigue. And then the length is the other thing with Zoom fatigue, is the length of the sessions, making sure that there are frequent breaks where people are looking after themselves as well during that, giving people time to exercise, walk around, and not doing really huge online sessions. I think limiting it to 45 an hour long, and then having a break, and then coming back again, just to give people time to stretch really. And then doing a blend, so you're not always online. You're in class sometimes, you're out of class. Yeah, that kind of thing really.
Excellent. Quite a few questions. I want to move to Munir, who has been patiently raising his virtual hand. So Munir, would you like to ask your question?
Hello, hi. Thank you, Christina, and hi, good morning, Saudi Arabia time, everyone. Thank you to both presenters. I really enjoyed both presentations. So I'd like just to share some concern, or let's say I have this question to both presenters actually. Now, as we can see, we are racing the clock just to provide or to improve our infrastructure to provide or to make our education, distance education, kind of easier. And I don't think it's going to be long before we achieve that. But my concern, my question is, how about what I call the real human interaction? Are we going to reach a point in the future in which we might think that actually we might have gone too far, and maybe we made a bit of a mistake actually to go this far, that we created a whole generation that is unable to even interact person to person? Research has suggested that people are nicer to each other when they interact in real life situations compared to when they interact online. So we create whole generations said who are used to interact online, but once we are faced with each other, they might maybe, I don't know, we might have a bit of struggle. And coming from Saudi Arabia myself, I mean, I think we've seen that with since classrooms at university are segregated men and women, and sometimes there was a little bit of tension when we met abroad and met each other and studied in one classroom, because we're not used to that, and suddenly you are faced with a situation. So what do both presenters think of that?
Thank you, Munir. Who would like to respond first?
Yeah, I mean,
Sure.
can I just get in for I won't spend very long. I think first of all, I don't think anything can replace social human interaction yet. And I keep saying yet because I don't know what's around the corner, and I can't possibly predict what's around the corner. Whether something will completely take over that, I don't think so. Not in the near future. But I think at the end of the presentation that I did, I showed you that video interaction where there was actually a 3D interaction between two human beings. I don't know if it came through very clearly, but what you could actually do is you can actually see that person as if they were sitting on the other side of a window. And that is very close to what we do when we sit opposite each other right now. I think the technology will develop, it will evolve, but I'm not a futurist and I can't predict which direction it's going in. But again, I don't think anything can replace human social interaction right now.
Can I ask if Dr.
You want?
Roy would like to make a statement to that
Sure,
question?
I'll make a quick response. As I totally agree with Michael. I just want to add that I really believe that online learning will never replace human interaction or higher education. I see online education as sort of as a supplement or complement. It's something that is addition of what we do at the moment. I don't see it as a replacement. And I think that's important, that we need to recognize that from a recent survey that just came out last week from Pearson Global that suggests that many participants worldwide, particularly institutions worldwide, believe that we'll never go back to a normal or pre-pandemic times, and we have to begin adjusting and thinking about how students should learn, and should students pick how they want to learn in the classroom, whether that's in person, face to face, or online. And I think that's going to be the future going forward, is students will have a choice. They will have an option of what they're doing. face-to-face or online, or blend or hybrid learning, etc.
And I think there is a follow-up question, just a little bit of a clarification. What happens when the camera is not allowed to be used in teaching and learning? Do you see that as a huge impediment in the effectiveness and efficiency of online modes of learning? Both of you. Roy?
I can.
Oh, Michael?
Yeah,
Yes,
sure.
go ahead, Michael.
I think there are alternatives as well. And I think alternatives are being created as we speak. There are things like avatars that can show emotion now and pick up on facial recognition. Yeah, I don't think you need to be kind of on camera. I think what it helps with is the human interaction. I think when you're on camera, it helps with the interaction, because I think without that, I know that I've been in some classes where people don't want to turn their camera on. In particular, I think it misses a huge it's a huge gap not having that on. But if it's a cultural issue and it's something that needs to be implemented, then I think there are alternatives to that that can be put into use.
Yes.
And I echo what Michael said. I think one of the biggest challenge with online learning, as what Michael mentioned, is academic integrity. I think that's going to be a key issue going forward, is how does faculty member control cheating? Not just, the camera, but how do we monitor and avoid and prevent students from cheating when they're taking online courses? And we've been seeing that very recently over the past few months, where students are cheating in these online courses and they're getting caught. And, it's unfortunate. But I think with new technology tools and resources that are being created, I think it's going to be, I think we will figure it out where academic integrity won't be an issue in the future. But I think, but as of now, it's a big issue that we're facing at the moment.
Yes, and I think there were a couple of questions in the chat about that. But before we ask those, I want to move on to a member of our attendees, Firos, who's been keeping the virtual hand raised very patiently. Firos, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Mr. Dr. Michael and Dr. about HyFlex and COVID-19 posed challenges. My question is in connection with what Mr. Munir asked some while ago, and it's an extension. Traditionally, ALLT language teachers, especially English language teachers, are using integration of skills during their lessons at traditional classroom, face-to-face classrooms. But I believe that most of the teachers around the world facing a lot of issues during pandemic issues when the classes are transferred to online mode. So both synchronized and asynchronized lessons, how can we bring back the full-fledged integrated learning approach or teaching approach or methodology into our classes? So could you please shed some ideas regarding this? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who would like to go first?
If you like.
Go ahead, Michael.
I think the technology is already there to enable us to do a more integrated approach to language learning. I think the technologies are already available for us to do that, and they're developing and evolving as we're speaking. Okay, so you can conduct these. The thing is I think a lot of it is to do with faculty professional learning. So understanding, I think it's closely linked up, and I think Roy touched on this in his presentation as well, that faculty professional development or faculty professional learning or training is imperative, because what it does, it opens up opportunities for people to understand that technology and possibilities are out there. If we don't understand that these possibilities and platforms are out there, then there's no way that we can utilize them. I think the other advantage is that we have got technology today that it's getting easier and easier to use. So it's no longer becoming a barrier to what we had before, and you probably needed a PhD in technology to do a lot of the stuff that we were doing before. But now these platforms are a lot easier to use. So there's still opportunities to create communicative approaches, and we have to reform some of those relationships that we had pre-pandemic or pre-remote, reform them in the way that we can do them online as well. So we have to reformulate them. In other words, if we were doing a speaking lesson, for example, we have to reformulate it so that we can still do that same speaking lesson. The technology is definitely out there for us to do it. The fact is that, like I said, you're going to sacrifice the example of the human interaction that you had unless the technology can support it. And as time is developing, I think that is going to solve itself. And if you want, we're talking about a more integrated approach. I think that it's a little bit problematic at the moment with HyFlex because there's an asynchronous element to that. And I think with language learning in particular, I think there are some things that you can do asynchronously, but there are other things that you need to do synchronously. And in doing that, you need to make sure that you incorporate that in. So it has to be not a traditional HyFlex model, but it has to be things that you can actually do asynchronously that you put asynchronously. So again, I think the technology is out there. I think it's important for people to be aware that the technology is out there for you to do this, but it's also about using it to your advantage, using it to reformulate the context that you had before in the digital world.
Thank you, Michael. Roy, would you like to make a statement as well?
Yeah, sure. I echo what Michael said. I really believe we have all the tools and resources that we need to do online instruction effectively. And I think, once again, as what Michael mentioned, it's not just faculty training, but I think for those faculty members who may not be as tech savvy, I think it's important for practitioners to consider creating a one-stop shop where both faculty and students could get that training and information to either teach an online course or for students to learn how to use these online platforms for those who may not be as well tech savvy. There has been some institutions in the United States where they create a one-stop shop. It's a website that explains everything in very simple, easy to read information, which I think it's very critical since a lot of faculty members are likely probably not as tech savvy compared to the millennials or the Gen Z, etc. So having some sort of one area where students and faculty can get help and assistance, I think that really makes a difference as they experience some virtual online learning.
Yes. So support is key. And we have Mubarak Ali, who would like to ask a question. Go ahead, Mubarak.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all. First of all, I'm extending my sincere thanks to Michael and Roy for your invaluable insight, and extending my thanks to the organizer for this opportunity. My question to Roy: what's the most important takeaway you want people to remember after reading this book? And I'm very excited to read your book, sir, and thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think one of the most important thing that I want practitioners and educators to remember is that we will never go back to pre-pandemic normal era where online learning is viewed as inferior or as not as good as in-person instruction. So part of this book project is to inform educators of the role of virtual learning in shaping higher education, access, retention, and completion for all students. And I think part of part of my desire when I created this book is I knew when the pandemic started in March 2020 that this is going to re-revolutionize or reimagine online education and how we actually conduct higher education as a business for our students. And I think this book sort of kind of lays out the framework of what of that students should have a choice of of deciding whether they want to learn in person or online. And part of my hope is that the book will empower and inform educators of the role of online education in the future, and how we can better serve our students, particularly underserved students, to have access to education, particularly in marginalized communities. So my book covers several topics from instructional design, social media, sense of belonging, the role of artificial intelligence in higher education. And I think all of these themes kind of pave the future of the different types of learning that will occur both online and in person as we move forward in the pandemic as well as the endemic, hopefully sometime soon in the future. But I really believe that COVID is not going to disappear anytime soon. I think it's here to stay for quite a while, and we have to, accept the fact that this is something we need to, take into consideration when we think about instructional design and creating courses remotely for our students. I don't know if that answered your question, Rebecca.
Yep, that was definitely on point. Now there are a few concerns, a few questions about specific concerns that teachers have when it comes to online learning. And one of them has to do with how attentive students are. So let me just read the question. Whatever mode of teaching we adopt, whether it is a face-to-face or online or blended learning, students become less and less attentive. Their quality of listening is going down. I feel this is all because we're living in an age of chatter and distraction. Distraction. Do you suggest something to overcome this issue?
Michael,
First of all, have you experienced that with your students?
I think meditation works quite well. I'm being serious, actually. I'm not leaving that as a thing. I think looking after the well-being of students and faculty is really, really important. Yeah, I think we do get lots of distractions. There are far many more distractions in the day than they were in the past, and that's because a lot of the information, we're being bombarded with information, or maybe in most cases misinformation about different things. I think it's really, really important to have a healthy balance, and nowhere is that more important than today. I think it really, really is important that you have down times and you're able to just take a break from it. But like I said, I think it's important to focus on the positive aspects that it can bring as well, and look at the balance between the two, and try and mitigate the things that are bad, but also promote the things that are good with this technology. And attention is one of those things. I mean, we could be standing in a class and delivering something, and if our students don't think it's interesting, they're just going to drop off, right? So it doesn't make any difference whether we're in front of them or whether we're digital. You might need a few more skills if it's digitally done, but you still need to keep them alert and interactive. So I think a lot of the pedagogies that we would employ in a face-to-face situation need to be transferred over to an online. I don't think it's I don't think
Yes.
there's a huge difference to that.
And I think you both mentioned faculty training, instructional design of the materials, and pedagogy as key ingredients to making that online or different modes of online learning successful. Also, another issue that kept coming up, and we kind of touched upon just before, was the evaluation or assessment of student learning, how to make online evaluation more effective and reliable. And I think Roy mentioned a little bit about cheating and the role of cameras in preventing cheating. So would you like to elaborate a little bit more on that, how to make online evaluation more effective and reliable? Let's start with Roy this time.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I think that's always going to be a challenge, is evaluation, and I think a lot of it has to do with collaboration. For when we create any sort of evaluation, we want to collaborate with, whether that's the institutional research office or the assessment office. Here in the United States, we have evaluations. We partner with the institutional research office to create these evaluations. When we're thinking about course program, thinking about the course as a whole, but when we're thinking about student evaluation, I think it's hard to create reliable, evaluation. Cheating is going to occur. It's just not going. There are different ways that we could prevent cheating in the classroom, but I think one thing that we have to just do is create more workshops for faculty members, to strategize what are the best approaches to mitigate, online cheating or plagiarism, or even, people copying and taking stuff from the internet. Luckily, there are a lot of software such as Turnitin and other, plagiarized software that prevents students from cheating, but it is unfortunately uninventable to kind of prevent that to happen. I'm pretty sure Michael has a better way of how we could possibly avoid that or prevent that.
Not better, but just something to add to what you just said, Roy. I think there's definitely just what you said at the end about the software and Turnitin being a fine example of that. But there's also, I just wanted to talk about just briefly about some of the exam like proctoring. There are some exam proctoring software out there as well that does quite a good sophisticated job of checking multiple access points when students are participating in examinations for things like cheating. So things like auto authentication, there's auto proctoring, and then there are lots of, when you turn the video on, violations with video, there are different things. There are things like keystrokes that people monitor. So there are multiple different ways, and those systems actually work together to determine whether a student is teaching or not. And some services actually add a human audit as well on top. So there's a human audit as well that can happen as well to determine if somebody's cheating in an exam condition. But I think we need to look at assessment in general, right? We need to maybe look at reassess assessment. Okay, we need to look at what is assessment and how do we look at assessment in general. It's not just summative assessment. We need to think about assessment for learning and things like that as well. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're all in this deal for. We're here to make or to help students learn. We're not here necessarily to teach to a test. I know that's what it seems like a lot of the time, but I think that's really important. Again, technology is out there, but I think we need to rethink education as well in general. And I think we needed to do that for a long time. I don't think it's just because of the online scenario now that we're presented with.
That's an excellent point. I think probably COVID just gave us that push to start experimenting with new ways, new modes of teaching and learning. So perhaps it's also time to reassess the assessment of students learning and find different ways to assess that maybe will be less possible for students to cheat or plagiarize. Another question that came a little bit earlier in the chat, which of the two will have the most impact, I'm guessing, on learning, the synchronous or the asynchronous mode, and why? So this was addressed to both of you. Who would like to start?
I think
Well,
you should pick Christina.
Roy, would you like to start
yes.
first?
I would like to hear Christina's thoughts about this. I mean, it's hard to quantify impact. I think impact could occur both ways, whether that's asynchronous or synchronous. I don't view one higher than the other, because I think they both have their drawbacks, pros and cons. There has been, a lot more recent research with asynchronous that student grades, as I've mentioned, are decreasing when the pandemic shifted to 100% remote online learning. Students' performance went down. They were less engaged. They were less interactive in the classroom, and that will ultimately decrease their mental health, their self-esteem, their self-efficacy, their ability to learn in the classroom, and the desire to learn. And I think all of that kind of has negative impacts, if we're talking about impacts, compared to face-to-face instruction. I do see more that human connection will drive more positive impact when we're in person compared to online. But as I said earlier, that I think through certain tools and resources, online learning can also deliver a positive impact if the faculty is well trained and able to view online teaching as an art where they use their creativity and their imagination, where they differentiate the learning and meet the student's need, and where they are and personalize that learning experiences virtually. And that can be done through online because we have all the tools and resources that are already there. It's just now implementing it and using it to our best capability.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with Roy that I don't think they're in competition with each other. I don't think synchronous and asynchronous are, that one's going to have more impact than the other. I think that they need to be used in tandem with each other. They need to be utilized in tandem with each other. So there are times when, and just like we do in real life, there are times when we meet an instructor and we have that human interaction with them and we meet them live, and then we have that time when we're away from them and we have to do some work on our own or in a group somewhere else. As long as we were able to create those types of environments, I don't think there is a case for saying that one will impact more than the other. I think it's more like that they're used together in order to create impact in general. And again, as technologies improve and as we get used to normalizing those technologies, that's another thing people don't talk about. I mean, we don't talk about whiteboards and pens anymore, and they're technology. They used to be technology, but we talk about devices as and software. This is now becoming life. This is now becoming life. It's part of what we are. It's part of what we do. Just like the other tools that we have. There'll be a time when we just don't talk about it. It'll just be the natural thing that we do. I think that's how it's heading.
Yes, and I think both in your presentations did mention, amongst all the modes of teaching and learning that you mentioned, both synchronous and asynchronous modes had a complementary role and definitely a role to play in the teaching and learning process. Now, sticking with that theme, that topic, there was another question that came into the chat. For the past year and a half, educational institutions shifted towards online learning maybe they were not 100% prepared for that mode, which created a gap in students' learning. So the question that came through is, how can we fill that gap that occurred from online learning over the past year and a half? Let's start with Michael this time.
Well, I think we need to reset, and we need to. We were coping with COVID. That's what we were doing before. We were actually coping with it. Okay, we were coping with a situation that we were all thrust in, that took us by surprise. We didn't know it was coming, and then we were suddenly found in a scenario where we had to do something, and we had to act really, really quickly. Now, I think we've learned lots of lessons from doing that. And I think what we now need is a more structured approach to how we conduct ourselves in the digital and physical world. I think that's what we need to have a look at. We need to look at the relationships between the digital and the physical world. Insofar as all the missed learning, and I think the UN had or it might have been UNESCO that has come up with a huge number of hours that were lost. I think we need to reset. I think in an ideal world, what we would have to do is reset, start all over again, this time with the lessons that we've learned, and bring that on board. Is that going to be feasible in reality? Probably not. But I think in an ideal world, like I said, that's you'd have to reset and go back and say, look, we've lost all this. We'll just keep it behind us. And that generation, unfortunately, that was going to go through has not gone through, or hasn't gone through to the degree that we wanted them to. Let's give them some time to get through, because it's been a very unfair situation for those particular people.
Roy, would you like to make a comment?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Michael about, resetting. Sometimes we just have to restart ourselves. And unfortunately, when the pandemic started, what we see is what we call, people back then call it emergency remote teaching. And because of emergency remote teaching, that led to, the learning loss, the ability to learn effectively online. I mean, one thing that I was just thinking about, this is just something I just thought about, right now is, in addition to resetting, what if, institutions of higher education partner with business organizations to supplement the learning loss that occurred over the past year? Because business organizations can provide both technical life skills, 21st century skills that are needed to help them at least, gain what they've missed, and help them at least ensure that they are able to graduate on time and still be able to, transition into the workplace environment. Because sometimes we think about higher education as its own bubble, but we don't think about institutions collaborating with business organizations and having business organizations making an impact on students. And I think that would be pretty neat if, we find companies, Fortune 500 companies willing to help students who experienced that learning loss, and maybe they're able to gain some new knowledge and skills that they could transfer over, from coursework into a practical plan. But that's just something that I was just thinking about. But
Yeah. And I think educators did the best they could at the time when emergency remote teaching came into practice. There's a question for Michael. What differences do you see between pandemic era language learning, HyFlex, and post-pandemic HyFlex language learning?
I think it's all down to choice. I think that's all determined by choice. I think with during the pandemic, people weren't, and what we're living in now, where some people sometimes are coming into class, there are controlled class numbers, and some other people are at home. There isn't choice at the moment. It's because, you are there because you've been told that you can come in on that day and you can spend time. I think as we go through the endemic, as Roy put it very nicely, I think we'll go back to having choice. And I think that's with students choosing actually what they want to do with modes that they want to do. And again, that is all coupled with two things. First of all, it's professional development to make sure that faculty and students, and I put this in the chat as well, and I think that's really, really important, that students as well need to know how to learn with technology as well. They do wonderful things with technology, but actually learning with technology is maybe an area that we neglect with students as well. And then the second thing is with the way that the technology is developing, that interaction, hopefully there'll be a bridge to that. And so as the technology is developing, it'll offer actually even more choice for students to learn in the ways that they want to learn. And maybe it will even offer choice to faculty, how they want to work and how they want to learn with the students as well. I don't know. It's all up in the air. It's all in the hands of not us. It's in the hands of what the technologies come up with, and the big tech companies. What are they going to show us next?
Do you have any technologies that maybe already exist to help us set up something like high flex language learning now? Or do we have to wait for the future?
No, I mean, we're experimenting with A-Lab as well. At university, we're going to experiment with something called Classroom, which looks at monitoring both remote and in-session simultaneous sessions, so synchronous sessions that are happening at the same time. But it's limited to one platform, and it's not inexpensive. But I think if people see it as an investment and see it over time, I think that would work really, really well. Yes, technology does exist. I'm thinking, I guess when I was talking about the development of technology, I was thinking about that last video that I showed where you can really see that human interaction between people through that window that we saw. I think I was thinking more about that. But yeah, we can do it. It is possible. We can do it now. It's just a case of looking at those possibilities.
And interaction, especially in language learning, when you get the students to practice speaking and listening skills by having a conversation with a classmate, being able to communicate is so important in the language classroom, not just teacher to student, but also student to student. There was a question a little bit earlier on. It was a little bit kind of general. It was addressed to Roy, and it went like this. Increased globalization and nationalism are not matching areas. Can you please explain? Roy?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so the not matching, they're two different things. So globalization and nationalism are separate features of part of internationalization. Is as the countries become more globalized, online education becomes more globalized, and the rise of nationalism that's occurring throughout many countries. Nationalists are trying to create their own identity, their own country. They're two pretty much two separate components. I don't know. What was the question?
So it was more like a comment than a question. It said,
okay.
I think it was something that you may have mentioned in your presentation. Increased globalization and nationalism are not matching areas. I guess
Right.
it means they are contradicting each other. So
Yes.
they were asking you to explain a little bit more on that.
Oh, okay. They are contradictory, and they're definitely not matching areas. So that slide that I've showed was just highlighting the challenges as a result of the pandemic, and these four factors, economic, social, political, environmental. I was just highlighting the challenges as a result of the pandemic. I wasn't connecting it to online education. I was connecting the pandemic as a whole and how they may tie and connect with online distance education.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that clarification. And we have Mubarak who would like to ask a second question. Go ahead, Mubarak.
Yeah, my question to Roy and Michael. When was the last time you did something for the first time?
You did something for the, can you repeat?
When was the last time you did something for the first time?
When was the last time we
Yes.
did something for the first time?
Something for the first time. Thank you so much, Mubarak. I was thinking about it as well.
That is a little bit left brain, yes.
It was the first time we did something for the last time we did something for the first time. Wow.
Well, Michael.
Well, you've stumped me on that one.
Maybe while you're thinking, Buthaina also raised her hand, and I want to give her an opportunity to ask the question. That's her first question. Go ahead, Buthaina.
Thank you for this valuable presentation, both professors. I just want to ask both professors, out of your own experiences in online teaching, I just would like to know your assessment of this experience after the pandemic, of course.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Buthaina.
Thank you.
Roy, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, I think it's it's an era of anxiety and stress with online learning, and I think a lot of faculty members could attest upon that experience that it's been difficult. I mean, it's not easy to create a highly effective, fully engaged online learning course for students, and that takes time. And I've had challenges several times where students feel like they are not satisfied or they didn't feel motivated to learn because they felt like the content was too boring or it was just hard to understand. And and part of that is it's just a different type of learning that students had to adjust, and it was just difficult. And I think I could resonate with many people in this WebEx that that a lot of you guys probably, when you guys taught online, it's been stressful and it's just been a challenging year. But I try to look at many things in a positive view, that with challenges there are opportunities. And I've had a slide about a couple of opportunities that these online courses provide: new collaboration and cooperation with different institutions virtually, and just hosting different workshops and webinars, and even talking to students remotely through virtual exchange abroad programs, and just connecting with different people from around the world. I think it opens up new opportunities to communicate, meet new people, learn new culture, new language, history, etc. So despite all the challenges that occurred with online education, I think it also created many new ways for us to grow in our digital literacy skills and competencies.
And I definitely...
Just like this event, right? This international forum, cross-pollination of ideas. Go ahead, Michael.
Definitely ditto everything Roy just said. It has been challenging. It hasn't been easy. We've had to make lots of changes to the way that we do things. We might have been used to doing some things online, but adapting and changing, and then readapting again when we've got when we're back on campus or whatever. That's been quite a challenge as well. I think there are lots of different human challenges, and I really am a firm believer that faculty professional development is really key to helping us transition from one type of mode to the other, and empowering faculty, giving them the confidence to be able to move with ease between different modes. Now that we've kind of experienced them in an emergency setting, I think it's an opportunity for us to set them up in a real setting and have all the infrastructure that we need in there that we can all work on and make sure that this experience is great, whether you're online or face to face, whatever, and employ and keep digging at all those technologies and having a look as well. What's available, what's possible.
Yes. So thank you again for being part of this forum. Your perspectives, regardless of the fact that you are based on 2 different countries, on 2 different continents, you seem to converge on a lot of these topics and issues and a lot of the questions that our attendees asked. And again, to bring to the forefront that opportunities like this forum where people, professionals from different teaching contexts, even different countries, can come and share best practice, hear and listen to other people talking about their own experiences, help us all grow professionally. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Wafa, for organizing the forum. Thank you to our speakers, Michael Pazinas and Dr. Roy Chan,